Like I said, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Poole. I am a project manager in the Division of Operator Reactor Licensing in the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation at the NRC. I'm going to go over some administrative items before we get into the main portion of the meeting. We're here today for Holtec to discuss their plans to submit a license transfer amendment request as part of their regulatory path to potentially reauthorizing power operations at the Palisades nuclear power plant. This is an observation meeting. This is a meeting in which attendees will have an opportunity to observe the NRC performing its regulatory function or discussing regulatory issues. Attendees will have an opportunity to ask questions of the NRC staff or make comments about the issues discussed following the business portion of the meeting. However, the NRC is not actively soliciting comments towards regulatory decisions at this meeting. Also, no regulatory decisions will be made at this meeting. A portion of this meeting will be closed to the public as proprietary material will be discussed, as was noticed in the meeting notice. When it comes time for the public comment period, I'll go over in greater detail on how everyone can participate. For any members of the public in attendance, there are public meeting feedback forms available through the NRC website, basically in the NRC calendar with all the on the main page. They're not today, but starting tomorrow, there will be a link there for you to fill out that public feedback form. For everybody in the room, please silence your cell phones. For those participating remotely, if your mic is not already muted, please mute it if you're not speaking. This will just allow everybody to be able to hear the discussions better. The agenda for the meeting is as follows. We'll go through introductions of those in the room real quick, and then we'll have some opening remarks from NRC and Holtec. Then we'll move into Holtec's presentation of the public portion of their presentation on the licensing transfer application, and then we'll go into public comments. And then after the public comment portion, but no later than 2:30 Eastern time, we will move into the closed portion of the meeting. With that, like I said, let's just go around the room real quick with brief introductions.
This is Bo Pham with the NRC. I'm the Director of the Division of Operating Reactor Licensing.
As I said, Justin Poole, Project Manager, Division of Operating Reactor Licensing.
James Illustratus and the supporting project manager.
People Gonzalez, Branch Chief, Division of Operating Reactor Licensing.
Mike Schulteis, Manager of Regulatory Assurance at Palisades.
Troy Gotro, CFO for HDI.
Jim Mixa, Licensing Engineer at Palisades with Holtec.
Jean Fleming, I'm the Vice President of Licensing for Holtec.
Donald Plumrose, Acting Branch Chief for Environmental New Reactor Review Branch. Also, Laura Willingham is also online on Teams, but unfortunately her mic's not working. She's part of the same branch as me.
Okay, with that.
Tom Pollock, DOE, Technical Engineering Division.
Chen Chao, DOE, Loan Programs Office.
Sean Okafor, DOE Loan Programs Office.
Alicia Williamson, DOE Loan Programs Office.
Matthew G, DOE Loan Programs Office.
Alan Lovett, Outside Counsel for Holtec.
Okay, Bo, any?
No, just briefly welcomed Holtec. We look forward to hearing the plans. We did receive the exemption request that you had previously met with us about as of Friday, and we're going through that right now, but interested in understanding the sequence of events that you're proposing.
Great. Thanks, Justin. So, Bo, thank you for, we appreciate your time today as we walk through our license transfer application, both the open and the closed portions, and we're looking forward to staff's feedback to inform our application prior to submittal.
Whoever started the presentation.
Sure, we'll get right into it. So I'll be doing the first couple slides before turning it over to Mike. So as we said, this is the pre-submittal meeting for the Palisades Nuclear Plant License Transfer Application, which supports the resumption of power operations at the site. For today's agenda, what we are going to cover in the open portion of the meeting, following introductions that have been completed already, we'll work through the purpose and the outcome. The outcome mostly looking for staff's feedback on our presentation materials for both the open and closed portion, so that we can better inform our application, but prior to submittal later this month. Mike will cover the background and facility status update. Bo said we submitted our exemption request, our first exemption request and licensing submittal last week. So this continues with the next licensing submittal that we detailed in the previous pre-application engagement meeting in the beginning of September. We will walk through the description of our proposed license transfer, and then go into the technical qualification overview, as well as the financial qualification overview that Troy will cover, following by the schedule, and then open it up to staff's comments. And as we walk through, if there's any staff comments and questions, please stop us. We'll let's not wait till the end. I think we've walked through introductions. We can go to purpose and outcome. So obviously we're going to discuss the LTA that we intend to submit for the Palisades plant, and present an overview of the direct transfer of the Palisades operational authority to a newly established holtec owned operator. That's a big point. And then as well as introduce the expected details of the license transfer application, the implementation schedule, and the coordination with other restart submittals, which is a follow-on to the chart that we had talked about in the last pre-application engagement with the timelines. This feeds directly into that original schedule. Again, we're soliciting NRC staff questions and comments ahead of our submittal. And the other outcome will be to provide information to support the NRC resource allocation for the review of all of our licensing submittals.
Okay, I'll talk to the background information. Jim Mixa, Palisades. So in May of 2022, the prior owner, Entergy, went into the decommissioning process by shutting down and defueling Palisades, and it was officially entered with the docketing of the 5082 Alpha 1 certifications for permanent defueling and permanent cessation of power operations. Shortly after that, the permanent defuel technical specifications were implemented at Palisades, and on June 28th of 2022, HDI acquired Palisades with qualifications to carry out decommissioning under the shutdown licensing basis. So the important part here is Holtec assumed ownership with the plant in a decommissioned state at the time. So that's the important point there. And HDI is seeking NRC approval to reinstate the power operations licensing basis and to resume full power operations, and that occurred shortly after that. And that leads us up to today and the different activities and submittals that we're proposing as we have submittals. Facility status. So important point here is the restart project is separate from the decommissioning work that's ongoing to date and not impacting it. So we are still in decommissioning today at Palisades and will continue to be in decommissioning until the point where we would propose to transition back to a power operations facility, which right now is projected not until like August of 2025. So the project that we're running in parallel is getting all the documents, approvals, and everything necessary to get us to that point, to be able to transition. HCI has completed facilities, or have completed activities to place the facility in a safe layup condition at the plant, and there's no major decommissioning activities occurring at this point. No dismantlement of components has been done to date, and spent fuel pool is still located in the spent fuel. So the fuel that was offloaded from the core back in 2022 still is in the spent fuel pool. And then HDI also has maintaining in anticipation of potential restart and support the restart project, safety and quality assurance records.
I could just add on real quick, Jim. So I just want to be explicitly clear that the restart project is being funded by the parent company, Holtec, at this point, with additional funding being sought, as we'll describe in the closed session. So the decommissioning activities are being funded from the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust as expected by 5082 requirements.
And then with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
So the proposed transfer of the operational authority Like Jim had mentioned, right now HDI is limited to decommissioning activities per the previous license transfer order. So in parallel with reinstating the operating licensing basis, we intend to transfer operational authority from HDI to a newly formed holtec owned operator. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll reference it as OPCO because it's still being developed, just somewhat of a generic name. NRC approval of the transfer under 5080 will provide opportunity to review technical and financial qualifications. So that's the full-scale license transfer application will explicitly detail all of the required qualifications for Holtec to be the licensed owner and operator, as you would expect. Jump to the next slide. Here we're looking at current organization within Holtec for Palisades, right? So Holtec International being the parent company, and then the licensed owner being Holtec Palisades LLC, and the current licensed operators, Holtec Decommissioning International, right? And Holtec Decommissioning International is the licensed operator for several facilities, as you're aware. If we jump one more, you'll see just a slight change, the introduction of OPCO. Want to quick caveat, that's not replacing Holtec Decommissioning International. All right, so HDI will still be the licensed operator for the remaining plants under its current authority. But for Palisades, it'll be a new licensed operator entity created under Holtec International. Slide, no, there we go. So Holtec Palisades will remain the licensed owner as is now. So it's financially responsible party, holder of the decommissioning trust, the party for the power purchase agreements, and then the NEAL and A&I policies as it currently is. No changes expected for Big Rock Point. So with that, Big Rock Point will remain under HDI as the licensed operator.
And just for context, Big Rock Point has been is partial site release. It's just down to 8 SFC canisters on a pad at the site, and everything else has been released up to that pad.
That's right. And previously, it's been somewhat commingled with Palisades, and we'll see a clear separation going forward. All companies still ultimately owned by Holtec International, including no foreign ownership, control, or domination, as you would expect to see. For the things that are changing, personnel who are currently employed by Holtec Decommissioning International will be transferred to the new OPCO when developed.
Mike, just to clarify, site personnel at Palisades.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. The staffing, we expect to return to operational levels and qualifications. So we've got a little bit more detail later on where we're at current state. But there is a recruiting and staffing effort under development to expect operational levels prior to the implementation of the operational tech specs expected summer of 25. The site org reporting to senior management. We have another slide that'll kind of show the expected change in senior management structure for an operating plant. But remember that we currently have approximately 220 in-house staff at Palisades who were employed while we were operating. So we still have the breadth of expertise when it comes to the functional areas of responsibility, but our staffing levels will need to resume the depth of those expertise. We're using.
So I'm sorry, you said 220 people are still there right now?
Correct.
And they were all from when the plant was operating?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Holtec Palisades will reimburse the OPCO for its costs under the operating agreement, and Holtec International, the parent company, will provide additional support consistent with any operational needs to this standard. So the senior leadership that has been developed for Palisades return to operation, company president Kelly Trice, with decades of executive experience in the nuclear industry. Reporting to him would be our newly named Chief Nuclear Officer, Rich Baroni, former Site Vice President at Indian Point, 40 plus years nuclear operations, previous licensed operator. Also, Gene Fleming, who's in attendance, former licensed SRO and naval officer with operational background, and a holtec regulatory vice president for compliance and decommissioning, CAS certifications, and SMR. And then Site Vice President Mike Bolnarek, who is the current Site Vice President at Entergy, has been at Palisades since 1988. Also, another former licensed SRO and shift manager at Palisades, and then subsequently was manager for independent oversight and an IMPO loanee assigned to the operations department for industry evaluations on performance, somewhat highlighting the experience of operational experience with our key senior leaders to support returning to power operations. Next one, site org. So we still have key directors and managers from our operational period. So we're currently slotting them into the, I guess, similar operational roles for an operating org chart. We expect to return to staffing levels of approximately 500 full-time employees. Qualifications and training will be in accordance with the previous plant operating licensing basis. Our licensed operator training, we acknowledge and understand that this is a long lead activity for us. We've already started activities to restore the training programs and hire candidates for the licensed operator positions so that it supports our project timeline. We are not expected to need or pursue any exemptions from Part 55 to support the RO and SRO training. And then following the transfer, OPCO will implement the operational programs that were in place prior to the shutdown. One of the elements associated with the operating org chart is that there are some very specific roles that used to be, what's the right word, addressed in a corporate essence, that we don't have the luxury of having a fleet of plants. So we've increased the staffing at the site to accommodate for those types of activities. They're primarily in the engineering realm with PRA and things like that. But there are some increases from our previous operating org chart that we had to make to address for functional responsibility. Back to you, Jean.
Thanks, Mike. So for corporate support, so the Holtec International Executive Committee will continue to exercise typical oversight and provide strategic direction. So the executive committee continues with the decommissioning fleet, and it will exist for the operational plant as well. Holtec International will also provide shared financial, IT, and HR services for Palisades. So that is using our corporate office to support the Palisades in those functions. Some limited staff augmentation and contractor support will be utilized as needed once we move through the timeline. And then the OPCO will ultimately be responsible for all licensed activities and day-to-day nuclear safety, as would be expected at an operating facility.
Just to highlight the staff augmentation bullet, we're already in a revitalized relationship with key vendors with deep nuclear experience to not only support the project, but the long-term and ongoing operation of the plant. And so we expect that to be somewhat the normal day-to-day that we used to have in place as an operating plant.
Specifically, the relationship with a vendor to support ops training as well is well underway. So for technical qualifications, as we said, the current site organization is approximately 220 personnel, primarily incumbent operational staff from when the Palisades site was operating. The license transfer application will describe the training and the qualification program and the position requirements consistent with the reinstated power operations license basis. And then finally, the full staffing, training, and requal will take place in parallel to the NRC's review of the transfer application. So Mike, what's kind of the start time frame?
For the training and qualification, so like we said, the licensed operator training has already commenced. What we would consider the maintenance and technical training programs, we're expecting to commence late winter, early spring. That we're still developing those plans with, once again, key vendor support. All in all, so that key field activities can be performed by qualified personnel that you would expect to perform them when you're an operating plant under the licensing basis. We'll be doing that in advance.
So this is Troy Gotro with Holtec. I'll address the financial qualifications. So we recently entered into purchase power agreements with co-ops in the Michigan area. And the off-takers will be taking 100% of the power that the site generates. It's a 30-year fixed term contract with fixed pricing. 7 years at a rate, and then after 7 years it goes up and then terminates at the 30-year point with a fixed rate. What we're also using for our financial modeling is taking advantage of the tax credits related to the Inflation Reduction Act. We're going to assume that that we can take advantage of Section 45Y. We'll build that into the model with the PPA and with the tax credits. The financial model that we build is generating a very significant positive 5-year look ahead net income. Additionally, upon the license transfer, the decommissioning funding will stop, and then we'll return to normal operational compliance under 1050.75. We don't expect to have to replenish any of the trust fund balances as we have managed these over the last year or so. So we believe that the trust fund is still healthy, and once we kind of terminate using the trust fund, we believe that the balance left over will be more than enough to meet our requirements for future decommissioning. And then, as Mike had mentioned earlier, we don't expect any financial impact from Big Rock. Big Rock's gonna operate on its own. It's a very small annual budget, but it will not be in any way related to Palisades operations. All I have.
Okay. And now a little bit about schedule. Right now, our current plans are to submit the license transfer application in October of 23 with a requested approval of November of 2024. And then the actions associated with the transfer wouldn't actually take place until the August 2025 date, or when all documents are approved and to support going back to a power operations licensing basis and power operations at Palisades.
Jim, you mind we touched on this last pre-app meeting for the exemption request about the effectiveness of the suite of applications. The license transfer application would not be needed outside of those, but all together in August of 25.
Correct. They're all needed to support return to power operations at Palisades and to support the power operations, because that's a plant we will stay in decommissioning up until that transition date when we're authorized to produce power again. So the concept is similar to what we did when we went into decommissioning, where we were a power operations plant until the suite of applications were implemented on the date of certification.
If we just talk through a little bit too, just to be very clear again, I know we covered it at the last pre-engagement meeting, but so kind of the timeline and the process that we anticipate is when a decision is made to move forward with this restart project, that is contingent on several factors. But when we have the ability to make a formal decision, we will submit a 5082 Alpha 7 letter deviating from our PSDAR. In that letter, we will also voluntarily cease withdrawing from the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust. So that will be at the beginning of the outage, just to kick it off and to start it. So that'll be the formal decision. However, from a licensing basis perspective, we will continue to be in decommissioning with decommissioning tech specs and all of our decommissioning licensing basis and design basis documents until the point in August of 2025 when the suite of licensing documents are issued to us. And that point, once they're implemented, we would be we would restore the power operating licensing basis.
So this, reflecting on what from your letter from the exemption, you said that you're referring to this transition to power operations letter. Is that the 5082?
No, that's actually that letter we're referring to would be one just prior to that date in August that would say Palisades has met all the requirements, conditions of all the licensing actions that were in place, and the plant systems and structures are ready to support return to power operations. And that would be a closely followed by the actual transition date. So that's meant to be more of a notification of readiness to transition so that all the actions can be implemented, issued, like transfer authority and the amendments of those can be issued on that transfer date. So it's really similar to the past transfer authorization transfer when we transferred. So the intent is to of that letter is just a notification that Palisades is ready. It's separate from the
5082 Alpha 7 letter will be the upfront decision to move forward with the restart project, that we're deviating from the PSDAR in that instead of going from 100% fuel offload, we'll do 1/3 fuel offload because we need the remaining fuel to restart the plant.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through. So basically this transition letter, there's no regulatory footprint. Basically, it's a notification for us.
It's just a notification in advance that we've met all the requirements of all the licensing actions, and we will transition on this date in the near future.
Okay.
Which we think might correlate to the exact date of transitioning from decommissioning to the ROP.
I guess, and you may not have the answer right now, but from your perspective, where do you see as the crossover point from our regulatory footprint, basically, or decision in terms of you now have you have the authority to operate?
And that August date, that August 25 date is when that will be actually implemented. It could be approved ahead of time, but not be able to be implemented. Or the actions taken by that approval can't be until you have all the other
because you're asking for the exemption by the end of 2024.
Right.
So are you saying that it would be a condition?
The condition or the actions that it allows can't take place until these other licensing documents have been approved. And the conditions of those have been met. So we expect all those conditions to line up for that one transition date to have a really clean transition from a decommissioned plant into back to a power operations plant, and also a clean transition back to the ROP from a decommissioning inspection.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay. Brian, I see your hand up. Go right ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, thanks. This is Brian Green. I'm the Human Factors Team Lead for NRR. I see you've got some information in here regarding the operating organization and the management structure. I appreciate that. I'm curious, because was not at the previous pre-application meeting. Perhaps this is something that's already been discussed, but have you discussed how Chapter 13 of the SRP is going to be affected? Some of this I have responsibility for. Some of it is other parts of the organization, and I'm curious if we have all the right people to be in this discussion. Chapter 13 includes a lot of the people sort of oriented part of operations, such as the management structure, as you mentioned, the operating organization, the procedures, emergency preparedness, and a number of other topics. Is that something that is all planned to be included in the LAR?
There will be discussions in the license transfer application on those topics. However, there are separate submittals for the emergency plan and transferring back to an operating plan, emergency plan, as well as there'll also be a separate tech spec amendment to us for administrative requirements for procedures and also for SROs and operating licenses, ROs, reactor operators, and SROs. So I guess the short answer is the license transfer application will handle those parts of the SRP Chapter 13 that aren't discussed in other submittals, and it'll also discuss those items which are going to be covered in other submittals to try to keep these independent applications all tied together, trying to cross-connect them all so we all have a clear picture on where they overlap.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. That's all.
I'll add on to maybe that thought. When you're putting all these different submittals together, at some point we got to think about, like you said, how they're all going to link together. So in theory, if the NRC was to, agree to restart the plant and give you all these amendments and exemptions and whatnot, right? Some documents got to have the final document, right? The final license pages, the final tech spec pages and all that. And which one of these multiple things is it going to be? Or is it, we're going to issue these 5 different things and you're going to smash them all together? And then
so
how is that all going to work?
So
don't need that answer right now, but you definitely need to be thinking about
I can tell you how it's anticipated. It's the latter. It's all these different pieces will come together on that transition implementation date to be the final operating package of the license. Similar, it's the same process we used when we went into decommissioning, where we were able to take the separate amendments and licenses and implement them all on the same date to get a one package. And in our case, primarily to fuel tech specs. Now we'll have a one package power operations tech specs all on the same day, maybe different amendments, so different amendment numbers.
There's a difference, is that going to decommissioning is a lot smaller, right? The package is a lot smaller. Now we're growing it. And so I was thinking of what Brian was asking. So to the extent that if you have something like in the license transfer application, if there's, if they're supposed to address the organizational structure, with the anticipated, operational EP plan, for example, to the extent that there's any promissory note or some statement to kind of commit to that rather than having that, because again, the package is expanding, not sure the bookkeeping, just from an efficiency of the review perspective, we look to you guys to be clear about the bookkeeping so that you can point the reviewers to where they can find the information.
I do understand that comment, and our intent is to facilitate that as much as possible to lay out how these interact with each other and to your point, what the bases are.
Because like the main tech spec amendment is also going to issue license pages. So are those license pages going to reflect what's in the license transfer type thing?
Yeah. So we'll the intent is to explain that as far as what is covered like in the amendment for the actual operating tech specs, and what portions are covered in the license transfer as far as names go and authorizations. And those are very limited in the license transfer application. The actual conforming amendments for the license transfer application should be fairly limited page-wise and impacts.
Yeah, I haven't looked at your license pages in a while. It depends. Some licensees like to put the name everywhere, and others have it in fewer places. So it makes those changes either harder or easier.
You can take a look at it, but my experience was there aren't that many pages that change with the license transfer application.
The operator is not being called out as much as maybe
It's mostly in the upfront license, and there's a few spots in the actual tech specs sections. I'd say.
Just to go back to I think you addressed this, but normally if holtec were to come in with a direct or indirect license transfer today as a decommissioning plan, it would be something that's handled under the decommissioning team and the docket over there, funded by that.
Right.
So what you're saying here is this license transfer application that you're coming in is under the restart project and not a decommissioning.
Correct.
Despite the fact that you only have, the end result is you still only have authority to operate from a decommissioning perspective. Okay.
Correct.
Right. I want to make that clear.
Correct.
Brian, looks like you have your hand up next.
Yeah, I'm just thinking my way through all this. My group reviews the management and technical support organizations and the operating organizations for license transfers fairly frequently, and I'm having a hard time thinking of an example that looks anything like what you're all doing. So I foresee this being a little bit of a trickier review than we normally have. I think there's a path to success probably. But as far as preparing the application, my recommendation is if you've looked at those precedent, expect to justify more than what you see in any of the recent precedent, simply because every license transfer I can think of, the management organization and the operating organization has remained almost wholly intact. So you're saying you're coming up from 200 people to 550. We'll be really curious to hear about how you're going to ensure that those new staff are going to behave appropriately, and I'm sure training will be a part of that, and what other parts. But I think there's going to be a lot of questions, and then it might be an area for a specific pre-application meeting if that was something that was desired.
Yeah, thank you for that. We agree. It needs this detailed justification.
Michael Spencer, I see your hands up.
Yes. This is Michael Spencer, NRC Office of the General Counsel. I had a question. You were talking about the need to have change pages to the license to reflect this new operating authority. You'd have a new organization that would have authority to operate the reactor. Would those changes to the license, would that be part of the transfer application or included essentially in the same package?
Yes, there'd be conforming amendments requested in the license transfer application to change the name of the operating authority.
Thank you.
To be clear, the reinstatement of the operational tech specs will be a separate submittal. I think that's what.
I was more about the first page or the second page. It says this organization is allowed to operate.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for that comment. Yep.
Tanya Hood, see your hands up.
Hi, everyone. Just so that we're aware, there are several pages where the name change is going to have to take place. So I just want to encourage you that when you make your submittal, please make certain it's more of a complete submittal based off of what your current decommissioning SAR, because we'll be starting from there building back. So that we ensure that all of those are included appropriately when you make your submittal.
Correct. Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to get hung up in several different name changes that you've had. It sounds like over a couple of different submittal moments that you'll be submitting in the future.
Yeah, I understand that. comment, Tanya, and we'll certainly make that clear so we don't have to, like I say, go back through all the different name changes that occurred.
Anyone else on the NRC staff have a question? In the financial branch? Not sure we've heard from anyone in that branch yet.
This may be obvious, but this is a direct license transfer, right? From the sounds of it. And so there will be conforming amendments associated with it. Correct.
That's how we anticipate it. Yes, that's how we planned for it, have envisioned it.
All right, so there'll be the order followed by the conforming amendment.
Right, and then those conforming amendments will be issued on that transition date out in August.
Okay, so you're essentially looking for the order approval in the I forget what this
time for November
2024. Yeah, and then we would execute the transfer
on that transition days term we've been using that, which is the August 2025 date.
Okay.
Can you guys unmute Sean Harwell? Because he was trying to talk, I think, for the financial branch. This is Fred.
I made him a presenter. He should have the ability to do that, but yeah, I don't know. He's in the same category as everybody else in the NRC. I'm not sure what more to add. I do see he joined differently. I see a little telephone next to his name.
John, since it seems like you're on the phone, if you can let us know type your number, and if you're able to type, that way we can pull the number up to be able to have the conversation.
He just he'll circle back later. That's fine. I think we're okay.
We'll have more discussions on that topic in the closed portion. So.
Okay. Okay, last chance. Anyone else from the NRC have any other questions, comments before we move to the public comment section? Great. So, with nothing else, we will now move into I'll open the meeting to the public comment portion of the meeting. So like I said before, hold on. Okay. I'll go over the details on how this is all going to work. Looks like some of you are already familiar with the process. As I see you raising your hands already in Teams, that's great. So if you wish to make a comment, please use the raised hand feature in Teams, and we'll go in the order assigned by Teams. For those joining by phone, please use *5 to raise your hand. In order to provide the opportunity to let as many people as we can share their comments, we'll be limiting each comment to about 3 minutes. If we have remaining time after everybody's made their initial round of comments, we'll allow individuals to make additional comments if they still have some. Keep in mind, as noticed, there is a closed portion of this meeting, and we will close this public portion of the meeting no later than 2:30 Eastern time in order to have time for that closed portion for the meeting, the notice meeting agenda. If for some reason we run short on time, you don't get to provide your comment, I invite you to email me, Justin Poole. My email address is in the meeting notice. And your comment, along with everybody else's comments, will be summarized in the meeting summary. So with that, can you tell me who's number one and unmute them? It's Craig Schultz. Make a presenter. Okay, Craig, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question or your comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Just for other speakers to help you, there's a mic thing that you need to click on in order to unmute. My name is Craig Schultz. I and my family live 50 miles from Palisades. I'm a member of Michigan Safe Energy Future, and I want to thank you for extending the opportunity for public participation in this meeting. The general public and our elected officials often lack the technical expertise needed to evaluate holtec's suitability for a license to restart and operate Palisades. But fortunately, the NRC possesses this expertise, and we entrust you with the responsibility to safeguard Michigan and the global nuclear industry from potential harm. Given holtec's past lack of transparency in dealing with the NRC and the public, we urge NRC to exercise caution. A misstep with holtec, particularly regarding past deceptions about their intentions with the PSDAR, their limited operating experience, and their focus on securing public funds, this could have severe repercussions for the global nuclear industry. I have many questions, particularly concerning, technical maintenance, upgrades, and different things that were required by regulations in the past that were allowed by the NRC to not happen before the plant was went into decommissioning, supposedly permanently. All of those things need to be brought back up, and we need to make sure that everything, there's a lot of expensive equipment that has been operating for, in some cases, 50 years, and we can't afford to have even a minor hiccup at a nuclear power plant anywhere on the planet. One thing I find particularly objectionable in this proposal or this presentation today is the idea that they would not return decommissioning trust funds to the decommissioning trust fund. First of all, the decommissioning trust fund was not funded adequately during operation from the previous owner, as is borne out in the PSDAR. And but the idea that they would siphon public funds while they have the intention of restarting for-profit operations is totally objectionable to the member of a public. They should not do that. They should have to return the full amount to the decommissioning trust fund. And I guess I would question why they even have control of the decommissioning trust fund at this point while they're pursuing for-profit ventures. And this would also have a bearing on the money from the state of Michigan and the CNC funds. I question just what happened with the PSDAR related to, they were misleading the public and the NRC while they were actively pursuing plans behind the scenes to pursue reopening the plant. So anyway, we rely on the NRC for your diligent efforts relating to enforcing the regulations and bringing, if this plant were to come back online, that we need to have high assurance that we would have the discipline and that we would invest the money, the public money at this point, to repairing and upgrading and doing everything that's required per the regulations, and to not backpedal and give deviations or allowance to cut corners. We cannot afford to have a nuclear disaster here or anywhere on the planet. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Michael Keegan, you should be able to unmute your mic. You're next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
We can hear you now.
Yeah, for folks, the mic is in the upper right-hand corner. I couldn't find it to unmute. My name is Michael Keegan. I'm with Don't Waste Michigan. I've been tracking Palisades since 1985. And pretty much dismayed at the slow motion bait and switch that's going on. Under former Secretary of Energy Granholm's watch, when she was the governor, she oversaw the raid on the decommissioning trust fund to the tune of $316 million. Fast forward 15 years, the new Attorney General of the state of Michigan, Dana Nessel, found that the decommissioning trust fund was short $200 million. So now we have the DOE pushing restart of the Palisades in order to hide the sins of Secretary of Energy Granholm. This is embezzlement. This is racketeering and conspiracy. We have the NRC colluding with the private corporation, colluding with the state, colluding with all parties involved, several of them, 10 to 12, to defraud the public. This reeks of RICO. Where is the Department of Justice when it comes to looking at what's going on? This is just a play, a greed play. Their Palisades reactor is fried. It is the most brittle reactor on the planet. Several major items, the head replacement was supposed to have occurred in 2007, did not, because the new head arrived faulty. And so Palisades limped along with a faulty head. The steam generators need replacement. The drainage system was promised to be expanded, promised the ACRS that they'd expand it. They did not. The ACRS asked, what's so special about Palisades? Dr. Mark Kirk said, oh, everything's special about Palisades. And it became a standing joke. Now, the Michigan Public Service Commission has not done their due diligence. They figure the NRC is the regulator and they'll do their job. So everything's been put to rest. It's not been put to rest. The NRC is not a regulator. You are an enabler, and you are defrauding the public, pursuing a very dangerous operation, and it's not in the people's best interest. This is holtec, are masters at spending other people's money. They do not have a skin in the game. They are limited liability corporations. When they shit their britches, they're gonna walk away. So please don't go down this regulatory path. You're in a moral hazard. Everybody, every entity in this is compromised. There is no economic basis model for this to go forward. This is corporate welfare. This is a sleight of hand, a bait and switch, and the public is being defrauded. So don't do it, stop it. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for your comment. Okay, Sarah, you're up next.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sarah Snewink. I'm the Programs and Projects Manager for Market Van Buren, which is the economic development organization for Van Buren County, where the plant is located. Just want to start with a thank you all for the opportunity to provide some public comment. I'd like to take just a moment to articulate our organization's support for the proposed pathway to repowering the plant, given Palisades' positive impact on both economic and community development efforts. Primarily, that comes down to three things that the plant makes possible in our communities. One is the reintroduction of good paying jobs. Prior to closure, the plant employed 600 people. The nuclear industry is known for stable employment opportunities and good wages. We'd like to see that opportunity return to our community. Second is growth in tax base. The power plant for a long time was the largest taxpayer in Van Buren County, which allowed for provision of local services and community development efforts, which in turn supports business growth and retention throughout the county. And third, the power generation of the plant itself. The plant represents an increased availability of reliable carbon-free energy generation, which helps mitigate the threat of brownouts and supports business expansions in the region. So overall, we see the repowering of the plant as a positive move for our local economy. We appreciate the NRC's consideration of the proposed pathway, and we thank you again for your time and the opportunity to speak today.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And we have next is Andrea Janetta. To be able to unmute, it's in the upper right-hand corner.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon. This is Andrea Janetta with S&P Global. I have two questions. The first is, when does Holtec expect the conditional loan guarantee to be issued by the Department of Energy? And the second one is, I'm not sure if I heard it correctly. Can you confirm that the first licensing exemption request has been filed? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your questions. So your answer to the second one, yes, it was filed, I believe it was September 28th. It may, due to the way we hold documents for a few days, it may actually not be visible yet in Adams, but it should be shortly. To the first part, the process that Holtec is going through with DOE is outside the scope of this meeting. We're not, it's not under the NRC's purview. We understand that they're, in that process with them, and whenever they've finished that process, we understand it to be that's when we'll know whether they're moving forward with the project or not. So
I have two follow-up questions. The first is, can you tell me what exemption was requested in the September 28th submittal?
Sure. The exemption is for the requirements out of 5082 Alpha 2, which basically says after you've sent in your 2 certification letters per 5082 Alpha 1, that you're no longer going to operate and you've removed the fuel permanently from the reactor. So that they're asking for exemption from that requirement because once you've sent those 2 documents in, the regulations state that you're no longer authorized to operate a reactor or put fuel into the reactor vessel. So they need that exemption to reverse that, so to speak.
Okay. And my second question, it's a follow-up. Perhaps maybe Holtec could answer the question about the conditional loan guarantee. You can do a no comment.
I understand. Yeah, I don't believe they have any comment. The questions from the public are to be directed at NRC staff, so they choose not to answer. That's
okay. Great. Thank you very much.
No problem. Okay, up next, Kevin Camps. Please unmute yourself and ask your question or comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I had headphones on and it wouldn't let me use the microphone, I guess. Thank you so much. My name is Kevin Camps. I serve as radioactive waste specialist at Beyond Nuclear, and I'm a board of directors member at Don't Waste Michigan, representing my hometown Kalamazoo chapter, which is where I'm speaking to you from, 40 miles downwind of Palisades. I do have a question that I would love an answer to from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I am wondering who will be the official party, the official owner of Palisades in terms of Price-Anderson Act liability and non-Price-Anderson Act liability, because there's a lot of corporate shell game going on, obviously, And I'm wondering who is the responsible party if a meltdown takes place at Palisades. And I know that Price Anderson, there's a lot of hoops that have to be jumped before it even activates, but we're talking the potential for hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. federal taxpayer liability under the Price Anderson Act. And I'm wondering which corporate entity that would fall upon, and also the non-Price Anderson Act liability. So I'd love a response to that, but I'll just go through my 3 minutes here. You know, now the job number is down to 500. It had been previously more like 600, 650. A lot of numbers get thrown around. There's a lot of moving targets that change all the time. So I did a little bit of math on these job numbers. So we know that at least $3.3 billion of public subsidy is being sought by Holtec. $300 million from the state, $3 billion from the Department of Energy. And I'll point out that Mr. Shaw is sitting there, so he could have perhaps responded to the reporter's question just now from the Loan Programs Office at DOE. So if you divide $3.3 billion by 280 restored jobs, that is $11,785,714.30 per restored job. And I don't think that's a very efficient job creation mechanism. That's a lot of money per job. I think there's better ways to invest that for societal good. We have a very serious homelessness crisis in Kalamazoo right now. And I think every single homeless person in this community could be given a mansion for this kind of money, for one thing, just an example. Another question I would love the NRC to answer is, has Holtec actively maintained the steam generators since June 28th of 2022, if they plan to restart this reactor and use those steam generators? A related question on the turbine generator, has Holtec been rotating the turbine generator, or is it bending under its own weight as we speak? And another question I have for the NRC, and it's oversight of the Decommissioning Trust Fund. How is it that Holtec spent $44 million from the Decommissioning Trust Fund from June 28th to December 31st of 2022? Again, I did a little bit of math, and that's $8.8 million per month. So at that rate, is Holtec still spending at that rate out of the Decommissioning Trust Fund? Because at that rate, after 56 months or less, after 4 years and 8 months of that kind of spending, the Decommissioning Trust Fund will be empty. And as Craig Schultz said earlier, it is really outrageous that Holtec is spending the Decommissioning Trust Fund at this rate, has no plans to put a single penny in the future, is going to make more contamination with the old reactor, is going to make more contamination with the 4 SMRs it wants to build there. These are financial crimes, and NRC is complicit in this. If you approve all this, and you're approving this. You have been.
Okay.
That they have not done any decommissioning, and yet they've spent probably $100 million from the DTF already. How do you do that? How do you do that? Are you installing solid?
Camp, I'm gonna have to cut you off there. I'll try to answer some of your questions, but we need to allow time for others to be able to ask questions. We still have 8 people in the queue here. The ones that I know I can answer, well, at least my understanding is they're not changing the ownership, so the ultimate ownership goes back to Holtec. That's not with the license transfer. The transfer is just the operation, not the ownership. The steam generator and turbine generator status, I think it was in the last meeting we asked you could reach out to to our public affairs office. We don't have the people in this meeting to answer that specific question. That's more of an inspection type question. And again, as I think talked last time with the Decommissioning Trust Fund, we review the reports and we've put out our report on their reviews. So with that, we'll move to the next individual. Jacqueline Drexler. I may have
Yes,
said
hi.
that wrong. I apologize.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi there. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today. So I'm calling from Rockland County, New York, on the shores of the Hudson River, 3 miles across the bay, as we say, from Indian Point. But I'm calling today regarding the Palisades license transfer to Holtec International. I feel there must be a comprehensive environmental impact statement completed by the Department of Energy before any contemplation of any loans or grants that could be given to Holtec. The Department of Energy should also do a financial forensic audit of Holtec International and all of their LLCs as well. And the DOE must do a safety study. Reversing the status of a decommissioned nuclear reactor, which has been dormant for almost 1.5 years, a nuclear power plant that it overexceeded its life with permanent closure to never enter the energy market again, to operating status is not only unheard of, but will cost the citizens, community, and federal piggy bank too much money to be worth it, especially considering safety issues and Holtec's money-grabbing propensity. We have the seals on the reactor vessels, which I think it might have been Michael Keegan already mentioned, which the cause was never determined, serious environmental and safety hazard. And one of the reasons that plant was sold was because it was the most embrittled reactor in the country. And here you are talking about reopening it. It's inconceivable. Then you also have the pressure vessel head, which was never replaced, the steam generators, violations of how could the NRC allow the spent fuel to be loaded into casks on shifting sands, okay? And there are weld defects on casks, especially cask number 4, which is still hot and defective. And someone mentioned from Holtec about their wonderful typical oversight. And let me tell you, Holtec's typical oversight results in many violations. I would like to say that we should be imagining instead $1 billion invested in energy that does not create nuclear waste, instead of a bailout to a company that engages in malfeasance and criminal behaviors and does not have any experience in restarting, let alone decommissioning a nuclear power plant. They do not have the breadth of expertise that someone mentioned. So Holtec is also using money that they should not be using. I do believe also that Rich Baroni, who's been at the DOB meetings at Indian Point, is now been promoted from Indian Point to Palisades. He probably got taken out of Indian Point because he always puts his foot in his mouth. I'd like to say that you need to stop giving away ratepayers' money in return for risks and hazards to ratepayers and workers. I also would like to say regarding the PSDAR, those things are not even worth the paper they are printed on. There's no regulatory footprint. The PSDAR does not require public input, does not require any approvals, changes, or denials. I would encourage any agreement to take for having Holtec to be able to do this, to take into account backdoor deals, state laws on air, water, and land pollution. Look at what Holtec is trying to get away with at the Pilgrim plant in Massachusetts and at Indian Point in New York. I would like to end by saying that, and I quote from Mark Jacobson, there is pollution, emissions, air pollution from nuclear power plants. There is nowhere to put the waste. Nuclear power is not the solution to climate change. And really, in the end, nuclear power is no help whatsoever. And those SMRs create 3 to 20 times more nuclear waste than a typical power plant, commercial power plant. So I don't know what you're all thinking. And honestly, there's no leadership here with the NRC. We're supposed to trust in you that you are going to be looking out for the health and welfare of communities where these power plants are located, and you need to be doing that. We're watching you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Up next is Diane. You should be able to unmute your mic.
Okay. I'm Diane DeRigo with Nuclear Information and Resource Service, DC area-based organization that's been around since 1978, tracking nuclear power, waste, radioactivity, and so forth. In this situation, I hope that the community that claims to be supporting reopening and creating more nuclear waste is realizing that there is no permanent place to send this waste. There's not even legally a temporary place to send it off site. So in volunteering to or agreeing to create more nuclear power in your community, you are volunteering or agreeing to the creation of radioactive waste, which stays dangerous into the millions of years, literally, that has nowhere to go. And so you ought to realize that you are volunteering, in a sense, or agreeing to become an essentially permanent waste storage or waste repository for the high level, the irradiated fuel that is generated from big reactors and so-called SMR, small reactors, and that in the absence of permanent storage elsewhere, that there is nowhere for the stuff to go. So you can't turn around when the reactor closes and say, oh, this has to get out of here. And as far as the waste that's already been created, that is also probably de facto going to be there on the shores of the Great Lakes for a very, very long time. So the waste issue is one that really does need to be faced. And are the so-called benefits going to compensate for the permanent responsibility for this irradiated fuel? Second, with regard to and a couple of other speakers have already brought this up, but the reactor was closed for various reasons. And part of the decision to close it was to not pay to make the improvements that would be needed to make it legal. Ones that have been mentioned and are these would include the control rod drive mechanism leaking 10 gallons of radioactive water per minute, the severely embrittled reactor vessel and containment that it will not be able to contain in case of an accident or could lead to a critical failure, that the vessel head needs to be replaced, that the same with the steam generators. And so the costs of doing all of these improvements, plus whatever else is resulting from 16 months of or longer of inactivity, need to be assessed. And will the NRC be giving exemptions for these things, or will the company be required to actually come into compliance with regard to each of these issues?
Okay. Thank you for your comment. You're at your 3 minutes, and we still have more people that would like to speak. So we're gonna move on to the next individual. Traven Michaels, I believe you're next, and you should be able to unmute your microphone.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I work for Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians up here in Petoskey Harbor Springs area in northern Michigan. We have the Big Rock Nuclear Isthmus within our historical reservation boundaries, and we've been kind of keeping up on the Palisades restart conversation as well. There's just a couple of and these might be some basic questions, and you guys might not have the answers to all these questions quite yet. But there's just some basic questions that I wanted to ask, and if they're not able to be answered by everyone that's in this meeting, I'm more than happy to email them to Nick, because I have regular communication with Nick Culp. So the basic questions that I have are real quick are: how much waste is going to be produced on average in a year of operation at Palisades? That would be question number one. What level of waste is going to be produced if and when the plant restarts? What class of nuclear waste will that waste be? And what is the current plan for storage? Based on some of the other comments today, it sounds like, and based on my understanding and knowledge of the regulatory landscape of nuclear waste in general across the country and the nation right now, there is no central repository for these types of waste. So I'm guessing that it will just be continued to be stored on site in casks. So I'm wondering if that is the case. And then the last question is, if Palisades is restarted, is there a future end date? What is the expected, the life expectancy of the nuclear power generation capabilities? Would this plant be operating, if it's restarted, would it be operating until 2050, 2060, 2100? How far out are we thinking that this plant will be operating? So thank you for the opportunity to comment and ask my questions.
No problem. And then, so to quickly, at least the last two anyway, the first two, I think, like you said, it'd be best if you worked with Nick to get the answers you're looking for, because we don't have those here in this room. But the storage of the waste, yes, they would be storing the spent fuel on site, like all the other plants in the country. And then right now, this action is just to restore the license to the expiration date it previously had, which was 2031. Should they choose to extend that, they would have to go through the subsequent license renewal process like any other plant in the country.
Okay, great. Thank you for the answers to those last two, and I will make sure to send off the others to Nick.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Kayleen Walker. You should be able to unmute yourself and.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So, the observations I've made of the NRC is basically that it's so massive and there's so much you have to look at that your job is basically very compartmentalized. And so sometimes we, the public, look at problems from a common sense overview, but each of you have very compartmentalized responsibilities. So my concerns are primarily with degradation of an aged facility and how deeply you're doing an assessment of those degradation materials, embrittlement, leaking seals, all of these problems that are being mentioned. So any of those could have a huge environmental impact. So one question is there going to be an environmental impact statement presented? I'm not sure if the NRC requires that or if that comes from a different department. That's a question. I was concerned because of what I just said, that on slide 14, there was mention that there's limited staff specifically with engineering and PRA, which is probability risk assessment. So I think that all ties in on some level, who is really looking at this facility to determine its safety. And that can get really lost between the cracks of the bureaucracy of the NRC. I guess that's my comment. And the breadth, not depth comment was also concerning. So, and I'm not sure how much Holtec in its using of decommissioning funds has considered assessing that which they were going to destroy and haul away, which now they have to determine is in a functioning state. It reminds me of an old car. You're going to have to replace a lot of parts to make this thing safe and reliable. So the NRC has a huge responsibility here, and I hope you rise to the occasion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And we have a little less than 10 minutes left, so let's move on to Kate Hosier. Should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question or comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Kate Hosier. I'm the city manager for the city of South Haven. I also serve on the Citizens Advisory Panel, and I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to give some input today. I would like to also thank some of the other speakers I've heard today, Sarah Soynick, who also talked about Market Van Buren, who is heading up the PCAP. There's a number of things that we are looking at and that we are excited about seeing this process go forward. We understand that this is one of many steps that have to occur, but we see that the reintroduction of skilled and professional jobs is a plus. Looking at the economic and community development in this area is a plus, but we also see the reliable carbon-free energy is a definite plus. This novel but measured approach to ever-increasing energy needs is definitely needed. So I thank you for your consideration and your measured approach in reviewing these applications, these procedures. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you very much. And next we have I'm not sure, it's a telephone number 914-723-4 something. It gets cut off.
It doesn't let me have them.
If that person can unmute themselves, star 6. See if we can get that to work. Don't see them anymore. Or they? Okay. So let's move on to Alan. I'm sorry. Pat. You should be, Pat, Marta, you should be able to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, good, good. So I'm Pat Morita, and I'm one of the coordinators for the Ohio Nuclear Free Network. And I want to say that our lawyers have sent in a demand letter because repowering Palisades is a major federal project under NEPA. And as such, it requires an environmental impact statement, which I think Kayleen Walker was talking about. And we certainly hope that the NRC will do that. I want to point out some things too. Construction for this plant, Palisades, began in 1964. That was the slide rule era. That was when I was in college, and at that time, engineers didn't know how to weld a nuclear reactor, and they used the wrong welding materials. And now that gets very brittle under radiation, and Palisades is probably the most embrittled nuclear power plant in the country. And then Entergy shut it down, even though it was licensed till 2031. And why? Well, it was uneconomical. And it's getting more and more uneconomical as time goes on. And as the competition, wind and solar get better and cheaper. So it was the power purchase agreement that made it the most expensive power in Michigan. And when that PPA expired in 2022, that's when the plant was closed. And it's been mentioned before, these other things are on their last legs because the PPA was going to expire and they were going to close it down. They knew it. They didn't properly maintain anything. Why would they expend the money to do that? So there's just a whole list of things, and I won't go into all of those. They've been talked about before. They were committed to do extra inspections to get their license renewal, but they have not really monitored the degradation, at least in the last year, according to some nuclear engineer experts on that. They should have added chemicals to the water to prevent the internal components from rusting if they were going to keep the plant running. They should have kept the steam turbines rotating, of course. And then it takes some time to get the new fuel, to build the fuel. So even though that was talked about, they have some fuel, they don't have enough fuel. So all this is going to take a really long time. Holtec's never operated a nuclear plant. What qualifications do they have to do so? And they're going to, of course, ask for a new PPA. And it was mentioned as seeking $3 billion from DOE and a bunch of money from Michigan. And there's been legal trouble with Holtec. Their CFO recently filed a whistleblower complaint, and they sued Holtec because the president was asking the CFO, the chief financial officer, to inflate the balance sheet by $750,000. And there's some other things too. ProPublica said that Holtec International gave a false answer in a 2014 New Jersey tax break application connected to political boss George E. Norcross, who was a Holtec board member at that time. So I'd like the NRC to please look at some of the past transgressions of Holtec before moving on. And I thank you for letting me speak today.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. This will be, since we're at 2:28, the next individual will be the last one that we'll be able to get to here today. As I said before, those that maybe still have comments or never got a chance to provide their comments, my name is Justin Poole, justin.poole@nrc.gov. Feel free to email those in to me. And like I said, if you didn't catch it right now, it's also in the meeting notice on the website. So who was the last? Alan Metzger. You should be able to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Yes, thank you very much. So I would like to express my thanks for the opportunity to speak, of course, but I also would like to express my my hope that this re-enablement of an important power source that basically emits nothing and provides reliable, copious power to a region that needs it right now, which should include pretty much most of the world. We need more clean power than we have, and this effort to restart Palisades will save a lot of lives if it's successful, because as most of us should know anyway, the number of people that die prematurely because fossil fuel plants run is very predictable and not insignificant. So we're talking about hundreds or even thousands of people that will have premature deaths if that power is not replaced by something that doesn't cause those deaths, which would be, in this case, nuclear power. And power has to be reliable, and we really don't have a good way to ensure that without sources like nuclear energy, and also keep it carbon free at the same time. I fully trust the NRC to make sure that we don't have RPVs that are falling apart and steam generators that won't work. These are things that get inspected regularly and routinely and can be replaced if they need to be replaced. We have a country full of reactors that have done that, and we have experienced 0 deaths from accidents at those reactors that have resulted in any harmful radiation release. It just doesn't happen. We're very good at keeping them safe, and the NRC is part of that, and I appreciate those efforts. So I would encourage the continuation along this path to re-enable this and to add to that carbon-free power with additional nuclear power there, so that we can all join the benefits of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And as sorry, something popped up on my screen here. As I may have mentioned before, we're at 2:30. So we are going to close the public portion of the meeting and thank everybody's participation, both from holtec, NRC staff, and the public. And Bo, did you have any last remarks for the public portion?
Thanks for the comments.
Jean, any last remarks for the public comment portion of the meeting? Okay, with that, the public meeting portion is adjourned. Thank you. For those invited to the closed portion, please join as appropriate. Thank you.